Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the special meeting of the Planning Commission of Thursday, January 6th of 2022. The time is 7 p.m. Would like to all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Now we'll move into consideration of the agenda. Just a few comments on the agenda. I had requested this particular meeting as a special meeting to allow the Planning Commission to kind of prepare for what we anticipate to be a relatively busy year in 2022. As we finished out 2021, there was a fair amount of activity and new members of the Planning Commission coming on board, including myself. As we moved into this year, wanted to make sure we were on the same page, so to speak, as far as plans going forward, things like the master plan, things like big items that we know are coming forward from the township, and just kind of get our ducks in a row, so to speak, as a commission, and lay some of the plan out. And also, because we have next week two applications to review as a commission, both for myself and other two new members, I thought it would make sense for us to kind of host, for lack of a better expression, a little bit of training. Training's probably a loose word, but it's one that just so we could have a better perspective on the process. So spend a little time tonight on the process, thinking about criteria for looking and evaluating applications, and so that we spend that time tonight, and then when we go in next week, we spend more time on the actual applications themselves. So to reemphasize, tonight is not about those applications. Tonight is around the process of evaluating an application and allowing us to, I'd like to keep it relatively informal, and then gain some input in how we would operate through this process for evaluating these applications. So with that, are there any concerns or questions about the agenda?
No.
May I hear a motion to approve the agenda as written?
I'll move to approve the agenda as written.
Have a second? All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Discussion? Hearing none, we'll move ahead. Is there anybody that feels they have a conflict of interest with anything on this agenda this evening?
No.
Vote on, a vote? Oh, they did.
We did vote on, but
Unanimous.
when we get that second, we need to, then we discuss it, and then we
I
vote
see.
on it.
I got you.
We did a little backwards.
Still a little rusty with that. I'm working on that. So let's do that again. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as written?
I move to approve the agenda as written.
I second. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, let's move forward. Is there anybody that has a conflict of interest with this agenda? And any items on discussion for tonight?
No.
Okay. So at this point, we'd like to open the floor for public comment. If anybody is interested in providing some public comment this evening, please hand in the cards, I guess, to Laura here. And then please keep your comments to 3 minutes if possible. Is there anyone that would like to comment this evening?
I do, but I didn't make out a card, Andy.
Aye.
Okay.
You don't have cards? You don't want to go?
You could please proceed. We'll have you fill out a card, Alan, when you. Thank you.
Alan Martell, trustee, Township Township. I'm really pleased you're in training, and I recommend training and training and training. The reason I came here tonight, one of the reasons was back in May, and some of you were at the Steve Longworthy meeting. He passed out a set of criteria. And as you know, I'm part of a group that was concerned about the criteria on M88 and not having it clear anyways. And many of those members are here, and we are concerned about that. So I brought you copies of that to have them. I recommend you look it over. It's good stuff. And this is, this is a really top-notch planner. As, and Sarah, I sure would agree with that. So I want you to have a copy of that. The other thing I want to mention too, to all of you, because you have a number of new members. You guys are the boss. I'm not the boss, even though I'm on the board. Township supervisor's not the boss, treasurer, clerk. You're the boss and you send it up to us. And at this point, I used to go to board meeting, to a lot of the planning commission meetings, and I wouldn't say anything. The only thing I would say is if we had something that was universal in the township, we're going to do A, B, and C, or we're going to have a special meeting next week, that kind of thing. Talk about what you were doing. I had to hold my tongue a lot of times until it got up to us at the board level, and then I could make my comments. Because we can do all the things you can do at the board level. We can have hearings, we can change it, we can alter it, we can approve it, we can send it back to you. Well, you look in terms of our abilities, we can do that. Generally, we don't, But anyways, the other thing I want to mention too, that again, you're being the boss, but there's a really interesting thing on the back side of this. Steve Longworthy talks about, do we make a decision based on public opinion? And the answer is no. Don't base your decision on public opinion. That looks strange when you have 100 and some people show up for the airport hearing. And you say, and they're all talking, no, 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 no. But in that public hearing, if you listen, and I've read them all and I've listened to them all, you'll hear a number of points that they make that are clear, factual, truthful things about the things in this township that are important as far as living here and use. The thing we're looking at is the word use. And so you've got to find that blend in there with regard to all this public outrage or even strong public support. You've got to look for strong criteria. And that's what this group that I'm involved with has gotten involved in. Maybe it should have been done earlier. I don't know. I was really pleased being at this meeting and what Steve brought up. I wish we had done it early, and I wish I had had time to even begin to pass that on to the planning commission and they could deal with it. You've got good criteria coming because they're redoing the zoning ordinance, but you can match it to this. This is also good. Maybe it'll be identical. Who knows? So, and in here, he talked about the criteria for site plan review, special land use, a zoning amendment, a rezoning, and all the time you've got to look at what that balance is in terms of that criteria. The big one I think of also is what the ZBA does. They've got 4 criteria to approve an appeal. You got to pass all of them. One of them goes, it's out. You have not got an approval. So that's something that, and they go up with this findings of fact. That was a lawyer recommendation. What was the lawyer's name? I don't remember. About having a findings of fact, because the judge will look at, okay, you're saying this criteria is good, but what were the findings of fact that support that criteria? So having a list of those under each criteria from, this is compatible with the next door neighbor because and you list those things. Or it is not compatible and you list those things. So as much data as you could put out in your decision is also helpful to the board when it gets to our level as well. So I want to pass this out to you. I assume you may have it already, but I highly recommend you study it. And you'll get something out of it.
Thank you.
No question about that.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Any I'm going to give you all my extras.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I want to say. Good luck, and if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to call me at all. I'm glad. If you don't want anyone to know you, call me. Good luck.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Emily.
Al.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Sarah.
Hi, Deb Graber, 1227 Beechnut Lane. I just wanted to let the Planning Commission know that the Torchport Air Park Association, by a vote of 36 to 10, are proceeding to look into evaluating the paving of the runway 927 along Bay Colony, about 75 feet wide, 3,200 or less, give or take, long paved runway along Bay Colony Road. When I looked at the township map that's in the zoning ordinance book. The runway is only zoned to a certain portion of the, along Bay Colony. There's about a 40-acre parcel that has a runway along the north side of it that is not in the zoning ordinance. It's not in the zoning ordinance map, at least not as of November of 2020. There was a filing by the new owners at the airport summer of 2020, and it was filed, I think, last January with the Equalization Department with the county. But there was rezoning done for that commercial section of runway that is not in the zoning map here at the township. So I don't know if that came before the planning commission. I never saw it announced. I never saw it anywhere. So there's an extension of the runway that has not been approved by the township, which you might want to be aware of as it proceeds. I think the estimate for the engineering fees are about $14,000 for the paving of the runway, leveling it, paving it, and then about $19,000 for lighting it, because they do plan to light both runways with LED lights. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else have public comments they would like to make? Bill? Not really. No comment. So with that, I guess we'll move into the main agenda. And again, the 3 items on the special meeting tonight are some thoughts about 2022 meeting dates. I think, Sarah, you'll cover that. And then we'll start diving into strategic priorities for 2022 and especially use site plan training we discussed earlier. So I guess that I'll turn it over to Sarah, unless there's, maybe before I do, is there any other questions or comments from the Planning Commission before we move into the agenda? Okay.
So for your meeting calendar annually, we have to adopt a meeting date calendar for the planning commission. As was mentioned at the last meeting, which would have been, I guess, at the beginning of December. Our regular meetings are usually the second Tuesday at 7 p.m. I had suggested maybe we move them up a week to be a little bit better timing with the county if possible, but that I also have a conflict. I have another meeting I'm supposed to be to at the same night. So, and I've always said, you are first, your priority. But if you wanted to move it up a week, I would appreciate it. And it would also help in the office, mostly just because when we're sending amendments to the county, sometimes either we miss a deadline if the next month or the months stagger in a certain way, or we have one day to do the turnaround because the county requires that we turn in meeting minutes with the packet of information we give them. The recording secretary, or the township, I should say, has to have those draft minutes available 8 business days after the meeting, which puts us on that Friday before the Monday that they're due a lot of times. So if we had an extra week, that would just allow better preparation to get to the county and potential for less human error in missing that date. Jackie's pretty good at what she does, but at the same time, Jackie goes on vacation, I will probably miss the date. So, but it's up to the planning commission. And then I did throw in there, we've had our meetings at 7 o'clock. That works fine, but we have been having longer meetings. I don't know if there's any desire to move the meeting up to 6 o'clock. So then you have a little bit more time, to go till 9 or 9:30. Somehow when you start earlier, it doesn't feel as late when you get to 9 versus when you get to 9, everybody's like, I'm done. So I don't know if there's any desire or if there's any scheduling issues with that, but I just throw it out there because you're setting your calendar so you can do whatever you want to do, however you want to do it. We will have to change the bylaws to reflect the new date, but that's something we can take care of really quick at the next meeting to just update that paragraph. So whatever you want to do, I'm indifferent, just put it all out there.
So Sarah, to just cut to the chase, the question is, will we start going forward? And I believe this would not start until February at the earliest if we did decide to make a change. Instead of meeting the second Tuesday of February, we'd be meeting the first Tuesday of February. and then the first Tuesday of every month going forward
Right.
for the regular meetings only.
So that's what I have, my availability for the first week is the first Monday or the first Thursday.
So it wouldn't be just changing weeks of Tuesday, it'd be changing weeks and the day,
The day in the week, right,
and possibly the time.
right. So, and if we can't get consent, if we can't get a consensus, then I would just say keep it at the same day and time, just because you're all here now and that's what you committed to, when you were asked to serve or volunteered to serve. So we don't want to exclude anybody if we're changing the day or the time. So.
So what would the two potential dates or days of the week be then?
The first Monday or
Or
the
the
first
first Thursday.
Thursday?
Mondays are always hell for me, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's not the case for others.
How do you want to go about getting input from
Just,
everybody?
I
I've got
just
it
would
written.
ask thoughts. I mean, does anybody have a concern or conflict with either of those options?
I would find it very difficult to make it on Thursdays.
Okay.
The first week is fine, Tuesdays are fine, Mondays are actually a little better, so first week Monday, fine with me. First week Thursday, I'd have a lot of conflict.
I have no conflicts.
Okay. Barbara?
I don't think we should change it. Just having been involved with local governments for a long time, every time you change the meeting dates and times, the public gets confused because they think they're coming to a planning commission meeting on a Tuesday and you're not there, and then, causes all sorts of problems. So I would say we just leave it as is, since there's no real critical reason to move it.
I would have no conflict with either of those. I don't have any preference or non-preference to go to either of those days or to keep it on Tuesday. In other words, my schedule's quite flexible,
Okay.
except for Wednesdays.
I agree. It probably would be really nice for you guys to have some extra time, so I'd be in favor of it. As far as the other meeting, I mean, if you say that we're your favorites, I'd be okay with changing. And the first week of the month is either day is fine. I prefer Thursday, but I can make either work.
Jason?
I would prefer the first Monday, just because my daughter does a lot of travel softball. And I will not be here on Thursdays or Fridays or Saturdays. So I'm also wide open on Tuesdays. I can't do Wednesdays, but if it helps Sarah out, I would prefer the first Monday.
Yeah, I have another comment. Monday is frequently a holiday. So what do we do in the event that Monday is Labor Day or Memorial Day or whatever?
The planning commission, you can decide when you're setting that calendar, if you want to move it down a week or over a day or.
Let's see, again, we're getting into moving it all over the place, and I think that's really bad policy.
I do have to say, personally, Monday is more difficult for me than pretty much any other day of the week. Professionally with my job and so forth, it's just harder because I'm picking up pieces from the last week, and the company I deal with is on the West Coast. So therefore it runs into the evenings. So it's easier for me to manage that if it's anything else but Monday. So I guess, from my perspective, we've had some conflicts on Thursdays. Monday's hard for me. We've had some feedback about changing it at all. I think given where we are, I think we'd probably be best off leaving it at Tuesday.
And the first week Tuesday doesn't work
I have
for you?
another meeting.
Okay.
So that's another question then. Can it stay Tuesdays? But what happens if it changes a different week of the month? Does that help you at all?
No, the third Tuesday's board here, the board meeting. And the fourth Tuesday, we could look at the fourth week, as well. If you wanted to do that, if you were interested on moving a different day, but if we leave it on that Tuesday, it's fine. We'll make it work. We may have to, if we have an amendment going to the county, look at the recording secretary and say, I need you to turn this around quicker than, your 8 days that's required by law. I mean, it can work. So that's fine. If we keep it on the second Tuesday, and then, yeah, the only other discussion would be if it's gonna be, keep it at 7 o'clock, or if you wanna move it up some.
Discussion on moving it from 7 to an earlier time on Tuesdays.
I'm fine with 7 or 6.
Either would work for me. I guess either would work for me, but I'd rather not change it.
Either would be fine for me.
The later the better.
Yeah, I'm with Lord, because when we get to longer daylight hours, I'll be working till at least 6.
Okay, so we're going to leave it at 7 o'clock.
Perfect. So we just need a motion then that you're gonna set your 2022 calendar for the second Tuesday of the month at 7 PM. And we'll be sure to get you out a sheet that has all those exact dates on it.
Okay, so can we have a motion to set the 2022 regular meeting calendar for the second Tuesday of every month, starting at 7 PM?
So moved.
Second?
With that,
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So we have the calendar set. So I guess we move now into strategic priorities for 2022. So maybe I'll start this topic off. I was the one who I think who was kind of pushing to have this discussion at the end of last year. And a couple things I've thought about, both leading up to that kind of thought and then obviously coming to this meeting, were just to kind of take a step back from in the community and thinking about what's going on. I know that there's certainly has been quite a bit of activity going on. There's some interesting applications coming forward. And kind of environmentally or macroscopically outside of the Torch Lake Township, we had COVID come and we're still in it. And, I think that has had an impact on this community as it has virtually every other community in the United States, and frankly, the world. And I think that changes the dynamic a little bit about how we look at life here in Torch Lake Township. And so just even without reading one word of the current master plan, without looking at anything, even evaluating those decisions, if you just take a step back and think about that, I would argue that in itself warrants consideration, because there are more people up here in the wintertime than there has been ever, and they're staying here longer. I can feel it on the remote road that I live on. And, I think people are seeking to work here all year round. That's going to have an impact, generally speaking, in a favorable aspect to businesses. I think that's going to lead to more demand. It's going to need to be supplied, and that's going to lead to more businesses. And so I think that whether that, changes anything in the master plan or not, I don't know the answer to that. But I certainly think it warrants a question to be asked, to consider that. So that to me kind of sets the tone for all of our sets the backdrop and tone for all of our initiatives going into 2022 and thereafter. Not to mention some shorter term things that are kind of on the table, the zoning rewrite, and our review of that, things like some larger applications that are out there, some things that I think might be coming forward shortly. And we have the air park that obviously generated a lot of discussion last year, a lot of turnout here at some planning commission meetings. So I set that backdrop, maybe to keep the meeting short. I'll shut up for a little bit here, but I just wanted everybody to know kind of where I was coming from at it. And I would like to open it up for discussion around this, just generally speaking to start with. Does that make sense, resonate with people?
It does with me. It does with me. I'm gonna say you might be right about change, just because of the amount of time people maybe spending here could live past COVID. With that could change the culture of our community a bit. And I think one of our jobs would be to determine what change is good change, what change is good and everlasting, and what change does a community not want much of a part of. I find it a little, when we went through the zoning, the ordinance edits a few weeks ago, my mind was, how likely is it to have suddenly larger things and more demand and more businesses? I'm not sure. This is a destination, has been for a long time. And so with more remote working capabilities for a lot of people, does it become somewhere that people are here longer and their expectation of what's here could come with it? And so I think it's an interesting time, or it could be an interesting time, I think, and that's why I support the things on the list, the ordinance changes, master plan, to think about the next 5, 10, and 20 years maybe differently than people in our chairs now would have thought about in 2018, 2019, when the master plan was done. I don't think it's going to be a 180-degree change, but considering some different potential futures is a good idea.
Other thoughts?
Well, I have read the master plan. I looked at all the survey results that was based on, and I was impressed by the number of respondents and the comments that they made. And I know that the master plan by law is supposed to be reviewed every 5 years. All that work was done in 2018, I believe. So it's not even 5 years old yet. So I'm not sure that we want to jump into it as like a complete rewrite or something, or do surveys again, or how would you propose doing that? And secondly, I noticed on this handout prepared by Sarah, under master plan update, it says that the planning commission made a motion to work on the master plan to add the existing airport into the plan. That's not true. There was discussion about it. Sarah and Steve Langworthy were asked to come back with, well, what would it look like if we wanted to do something to have the airport, what would that look like? If it was an overlay, if it was its own district, what would that look like? Nothing ever came back. So I don't feel like we did not make a motion to add it in master plan. So I'm not sure that it's timely to tweak the master plan. It hasn't been that long. I mean, it might be worth reading it over and seeing if there's something that you want to tweak, but I don't know. For the most part, I think it's pretty current. I'm sure a lot of townships have master plans that were written, 15 years ago. And they just keep passing on the every 5-year review.
Sarah, question. When was the master plan? When was the last rewrite of it and adopted?
The current one is 18, has the date of 18 on it. I don't know if that was a complete rewrite or if it was just updated in portions. I don't know what the one prior to that looks like.
And and I want some input from everybody here on this topic, or seeking that input. How long, when it was done last time, do we have a sense of how long it took from the time we said, okay, we need to get this started, to the time the survey was done, the input was collected, and the rewrite occurred? How long did that take?
It can take 6 months. It can take 18 months. It all depends. I don't know. I could look back and see if we can find out some information. Typically, if I'm writing a master plan at my firm, we would have them written for the community in 3 to 4 months, and then it would just take however long for the community to go through those reviews of those chapters, and then you have to distribute it, like I mentioned in here, for that 63 days. So that part takes a little bit longer, but the active working portion of it, usually it would be something you would have at the planning commission, probably about 3 or 4 meetings to review each the chapters after they're drafted. So it could be something that's 6 months to get it out to distribution. Typically it's closer to a year. It's kind of my safe number to say that it may take, just because planning commissions get busy with other tasks. Once you get applications, master plans and zoning ordinances take the back seat to applications, because those have been paid and have a fee associated with it, and people want answers. So it just depends on how busy we are for how long it would take.
Sarah, is that timeframe, the timeframes you mentioned, how much would change if it's an update as opposed to a from scratch?
It depends on how much you want to do with the update. So if the update's just something kind of smaller, where you wouldn't do a survey or have any public or community engagement sessions with the public, it's basically, let's write it, look at it, hold our required public hearing. It can go a lot faster. I mean, that's something that typically the planning commission could look at in 2 months, get it up to the township to send out for distribution to get back to public hearing. So 6 months. Something, the kind of update that we are talking about involving the airport, I'm anticipating would take a little bit more time just because, I anticipate a lot of public being involved in it. And then there is some educational component to it because, you're talking about the airport. We're trying to bring something into the plan that already exists, and it is a plan. So it's not the zoning ordinance, which makes things happen. It's kind of this plan which your zoning ordinance is based on. So it's not regulating. But once you start talking about any kind of those hot topic items, the public will come out, and then, like I said, it's also educating what we're doing. So I understand, but we're not really, I think our intent was not to change anything, just it should be in there. From a planning perspective, I think it was potentially an oversight or an error that it was not included in the master plan the last time around. I don't know. But the fact that something, that's that large and has public impact, it's, those runways are kind of like a public, almost like a road, you would just put it in as part of infrastructure somehow, even though it's privately owned. So.
So another thought on this, and to be clear to everybody on this commission, I'm not advocating one way or the other that there needs to be changes to the plan. It could very well be that the plan is perfectly sufficient as it is right now. The air park, I think, is a particular question around that, but I'm just kind of thinking more broadly than that. But it does strike me that it's worthy of a review or a consideration of it, to think about it. Because, and I'd also say, if it was done in 2018, next year is 2023. So I'm not talking about doing it 1 year after it was done, possibly just 1 year advancement. By the time we get through it, it might almost be the timing in the first place. So, so I guess I'll pause there. Other thoughts from other commission members?
Yeah, I agree with you. Things have changed since we did it last in the world here. And we've run into so many things, I think, over the last year even, where I think it's pretty clear that I feel like I wish we would have maybe done a better job and made sure that things were included that are missing or been more clear, more detailed, because I've experienced where it comes into play now. Like, we need to be able to look at it, and it needs to be clear what the vision is for the area. And to me, it feels kind of foggy. So I think it would be good to revisit it, to take a look at it. I wouldn't be opposed to having public input. I know that everyone that was involved in doing it last time, that there was a big push. But I can say if I wouldn't have been joining the planning commission at the time, I wouldn't have had a clue it was happening. Hooligans like myself, there's plenty of other ones like us in the community that they had no clue. And it would be good to get everybody's input.
Can I suggest that we review the plan, the master plan, and the results of the surveys that were done, and then talk about what we think we should do with it? I mean, rather than sitting here and saying, oh yeah, we should change this, we should change that. Let's look at what's in there and then see if that makes sense to change something. So I would say we should make that decision at another meeting after we have all read all that information.
Jason, you've been rather quiet on this topic.
I mean, I could go either way. I really don't have much to say on it.
As a newbie, and I'm really trying to get myself acclimated to everything, my understanding is that everything we do has to reflect our master plan. Everything, every decision we make has to be tied back to the goals and objectives of the master plan. And my limited experience so far, it's been a little difficult for me to do that. So, and so maybe that's addressing kind of where you're at. Like, I'm not necessarily seeing that we're consciously saying, well, in our master plan, this corresponds to this, and so we should move forward in this way. There's so many things that have changed, and I'm really concerned about livability in the community and the quality of life and, of course, the environment. And so I would like to see some things tweaked that could incorporate a more friendly, healthy lifestyle, like being able to walk and not feel like you're going to get run over by speeding cars. And I don't know if that can be worked into it, but there's some things that I think are worthy of us pondering.
Andy, can I ask you to please speak into the mic a little more?
Okay.
Sure. We'll do that.
Jason, I kind of like Barbara's idea. I was thinking something similar, a study session. Sir, when you said I wasn't here, I don't remember, there's meeting minutes. I'd like to see some of those to see what some of the thoughts were, as well as a survey. Barbara, I haven't gone through the survey. I'd love to read through some of that. And I don't know if we do that individually and then come to another special meeting, but a study session that says, based on, my review of the minutes, the survey, another read of the master plan, here's what we should do, and we maybe each come with that opinion. I don't think, to me, master plans are planning documents. One application, even if it's a big one, shouldn't cause a reaction to suddenly change things, but a review could allow us to say, you know what, it doesn't really fit what we think might be going forward now, or you know what, it mostly fits, but here's a few things that need to change. I read the master plan, but it was probably 4 months ago. I've not read the surveys. I'd love to see the meeting minutes so that we're not undoing some things that public input and other planning commissioners said, here's why we did it, it's a good idea, and we're kind of ignoring that and saying, well, we're going to start all over because we're new or we're unaware or because of one application. I think it's a good idea.
Any other comments?
Andy, I feel, excuse me, I feel like as though there's maybe not a gaping hole, but there's an area in the master plan that's missing, and that is the airport area. That's a large area. It's an important area in the township, and it's not really addressed in there, which gives us no direction, no framework to work in for anything that may be done in the future there. I think that however we nudge the machine to get it moving, we eventually need to look at that, whether it's this year or 2023. As you said, we're pretty close to 2023 anyway. So I would advocate any way that the committee or the commission wants to get started to get in that direction, to get our eyes on that and start having some thoughts. Also, it seems to me that the township is in a sort of a tipping point right now in terms of residency. It seems to me that a lot of we're going from original residents to new residents and descendant residents. So what I'm saying is some of the older people are dying off. We're now down to second, third, and fourth generation residents. And as Bill said, they're becoming more full-time residents. So I think in 2023, when we send these out, we're going to be seeing a whole different result from the survey that goes out, because Newer residents may have different outlooks on what they want this township to be. And that airport may be one part of it. I think Laura had, we might want to look at places like walking paths. We have a few places where you can get out now and move around. But when you have to use the main highway for bicycling or walking, it is a little dangerous. So maybe that's something we could think about when we're looking at this new master plan.
Tangible example of that is that, I think it's referred to as the Tart Trail or something like that. I mean, that's something that obviously could have an impact. And so I appreciate all the thoughts and input on that. It's a big topic. It's why I wanted to put it on here to discuss. Totally agree with, the thoughts of you can't realistically comment on it until we kind of go through it as a group. And so I think, Sarah, what I would suggest is that I can't really do this per se, but I'd like to assign the group, everybody reviewing it. Some of you may have already done that or have done it in the past and want to freshen up. And then I think, Sarah, a future topic, probably not next meeting, because next meeting is very full. Don't want to add anything to that at this point, but maybe the following meeting, whether it's a special meeting or the next regular meeting, we come back and we can remind everybody that kind of have your notes ready to kind of walk through and not necessarily go through every page of it at all, but just kind of general comments of what is your reaction based on tonight's discussion and go from there.
Andy, can I add one comment to that?
Absolutely.
When you're reading through it and kind of thinking how you would apply that ordinance. So look at the districts, look at the goals, look at the objectives that we have and how you would actually use that. Because the planning commission is going to be using that for your rezonings, for your special use permits. And so, Laura brings up a good point. We have this rezoning with the airport and we're going, the airport's not in the zoning ordinance. We had a rezoning that was up in the village district and we're going, we don't have a lot of direction in our master plan for what this village district looks like. So, those were just the last two applications where we're going, our master plan, we're having a hard time dealing with that. So when you're reading it, it may be interesting to read about demographics and the history and things like that, but the real important parts are those goals, what the future looks like, the future land use map, and kind of think about, if I have an application in this district, do I know what it's supposed to look like? Do I know what we want to see here, what our vision is? Hopefully that'll help you instead of, you can read it, but to help you kind of think about it, I guess.
Yeah.
And that makes sense, Sarah. And I think the one last thing I'd mention on that too, it was interesting when we were looking at, was it chapter 10 or 20? 20.
We looked at both of them last.
Yeah, which was the one, but I get the numbers.
ZBA was 20. 10 was the commercial districts.
Yeah, that's the one. We talked a little bit about, the Torch Lake Hamlet. We talked about village business, commercial, what do buildings look like, square footage, roof lines, all that kind of stuff. And it's like, when you're evaluating, thinking about that, it's like, oh, what is it that we're where do we want this to look like? Ideally. And then you've got existing structure and all that, get that. But if you don't have a good framework for that, I think that's exactly the type of thing I know I would like to see coming out of this discussion. Even if the master plan ends up being fine the way it is, going through some of that would be good for all of us. So, okay, thank you. Let's move on to the next topic, which is, again, I think Sarah will be leading a lot of this as far as kind of walking us through some things. And I know I personally have a number of questions as we go through it, but again, to reemphasize, this is all about process tonight and how we evaluate an application. I want to, I guess, for the planning commission members that have been on the commission for a period of time, I apologize. This is redundant for you. Let's get that off the table. But I think it's good to go into it next week with a refresher and maybe as far as how we operate together when we evaluate these. So I guess with that, Sarah, I would turn it over to you.
Sure. So I'm going to talk about kind of special use and site plan kind of all together as one. They are different. We know special use has the public hearing. There's a little bit more discretion involved in it. We've talked about that a lot lately when we're talking about the commercial districts and what that looks like. So I guess to kind of start way at the beginning, when we have a special use application or a site plan application, from the planning commission's perspective, you will receive in your packet, the application, any of the material that we've received in that is relevant to the application. So I may not give you a copy of a purchase agreement to show you that they have proof they can apply, because it's not really relevant to your, it's just paperwork at that point. I can, and if you want a copy of it, it's a public document. I'm more than happy to give it to you. But, I don't want you to waste your time reading that when it's not really relevant to the application. So application, you're going to get the site plan, which I've already reviewed, kind of vetted for you to check to that it's complete. In the zoning ordinance, it has a list of items that are required to be on your site plan. I go through, say yes, no, yes, no. If there's a couple that are kind of minor items, you may see that come in front of the planning commission, because those could be conditions for approval. Say they don't have their sign location on their site plan. I may let that come to the planning commission, even though they don't have it on there, because signs are dealt with as a totally separate application. They have to make sure that they meet it. It's might be relevant, but generally is not too important in making your decision about the use. But they've already been vetted for you, and you'll receive also with that a staff report. In that staff report, it'll give you a little bit of information about the property. I'll also pull out all of the sections of the ordinances that are relevant. So, you'll go through and you'll be like, okay, in the commercial district, this section says that car washes are allowed. Yes, it meets that. Okay, here's the setbacks, here's the minimum building height, here's all this, here's what's on the site plan. It meets all of that. Here's parking. To try to help you get through the ordinance. And, Jackie and I deal in the ordinance more frequently than you do as a planning commission. We're here to help you. We still may miss something. So if you're reading the ordinance and you're like, you didn't include this section, please let me know. I'll add it to the report so that next time it gets included in there. But I also go through, that same checklist for the site plan and say, oh, does it have their name on it? Yes, it's provided. So you can kind of quickly look through and see if it's on there or not. You're welcome to go through and check to make sure that it is. We're all humans, we all make mistakes. So if there's something missing, we need to make sure to mention that too. And then near the end of the report, we'll have the standards for approval. So I left on your desk the standards of approval for site plan as the first 3 pages. Special use is the last page. These are the standards that are in the ordinance to base your decision on. So this is, like Alan mentioned, it's not a court of popular opinion. Just because there's 100 people here saying you shouldn't do something, if it meets the standards, then you need to approve it. If it doesn't meet the standards, then you need to deny it. It's supposed to help, take some of that opinion out of it and say, this is what we have. So the planning commission, when you're reviewing these applications and making a decision, my staff report is going to say, for instance, section 1807, number 1 talks about, the site plan. I mean, you can read it, what it says here. And I'll say satisfied because of whatever reason. And when the planning commission comes to the meeting, you can say, yep, I agree with everything you said. No, I think we should change this, this, and this. It's kind of a draft. It's just to get you started thinking about it. You're not going to hurt my feelings if you don't agree with me. It's just from a planning perspective, what I've seen, what we've dealt with, what they mean, how I would vote or what, think about it. But, they're draft findings for that. And so typically I would go through and fill those in for you. If the planning commission doesn't want that much guidance, say you want to talk about it before you get some findings of fact. Like for instance, for the airport rezoning, it was more of a discussion, and then the planning commission said, staff, go prepare findings that deny this, or go prepare findings that approve this. And then we come back with those at another month. So there may be times if we have a really large application where I come to you and say, I don't have these findings filled in yet. I need more direction from the planning commission. It's a real controversial item. So give me some more guidance from what you're thinking. Or the public hearing is going to be really big and I just can't draft those findings without knowing what that public hearing looks like. Our ordinance right now isn't, it's a little difficult to kind of deal with some special use applications specifically, because it says when we receive an application and it's complete, we have to schedule it for a public hearing right away. So the planning commission doesn't even get to see that application before the public hearing notices go out, and then people start calling you and you don't even have your packet yet because just the timing of it. So in the new ordinance, that rewrite, that part's going to be taken out so that the planning commission can hopefully look at the application, schedule the public hearing. You're already aware of what's happening. You've already asked the applicant for additional information before the public hearing happens. So that may change a little bit. But I guess with the standards for approval, it's just really important to kind of walk through all of them. And Andy, I would suggest, maybe these first couple of times around, even when we get to here, I mean, you can go through and go, okay, what's everybody think about item number 1? Somebody's going to say, I agree, I don't agree, have comments. Okay, what about item 2? And kind of walk through them like that. I know it's a little tedious. It can take some time, but it also shows the public, shows the applicant that the planning commission has looked at all of it, is thinking about all these standards. It's not just a rubber stamp or that you're not listening. I think it really does help to show, that you've researched it and looked through everything. So for your standards of approval, all of them have to be met in order to grant the use. So if we're doing a special use permit, all of the site plan standards have to be met and all of the special use standards have to be met. If it's just a site plan approval, we're just going to look at the site plan standards. So if there's one standard in all of those that is not met, then you have to deny the application.
I've got a question. How do you do, some of the requirements are well defined, the standards, I'm sorry. No less than 8 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Who defines if it's met for some of the other items that say, here's a couple examples. Number 2, by landscape shall be preserved by minimizing tree and soil removal. Minimizing is pretty subjective. Is that okay? Is that usually okay? Or the site plan shall provide reasonable visual and sound privacy.
Yeah.
That's pretty subjective. If it's never been a problem, I'm okay with that. But if we do what you suggest, Andy asked, Jason might say, I'm good with it. I might say, I don't know, it's unreasonable to me.
Right.
Because we have a different definition of reasonable. You're the first look at it. Has that been an issue? There's a few others in here. Some are very well defined, an easy yes or no. Others are like, depends on how I look at it.
Right. Yeah. Those are the attorney's favorite ones because you can either approve it or deny it based on that. So some standards, it's just difficult to write it very narrow to get it. So the reasonable, it's a reasonable person, which I know. But that's where
very reasonable.
right. That's why there's 7 of you to help make the decision, because then it would get down to what the majority thinks is reasonable or not. You would hope that there'd be, out of 7, there's 4 of you that are reasonable. Maybe, I don't know.
I was going to say, I had the same question, and it was all about, I was looking at number 4, and it was the site plan shall provide reasonable visual and sound privacy, and that's going to have potentially totally different definition for anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so it seems to me that, again, although tedious, that you would go through each one of these and vote on every one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And ideally reach consensus on every one
Right.
with the vote, if possible, but it may not be practical.
Yeah, and that's the consensus. So as you're talking through them, you can, and I guess, Andy, this more as the chair, you could do straw poll. Be like, okay, what's everybody think? Yes, no. Or some of them, during some applications, make it kind of heated about it, and you're going to have to actually vote on some of the standards to get a decision. just depending on the application, depending on which standard it is, there's no right or wrong way, but you do need to somehow build consensus in it. I've had some chairs that say, okay, speak now or forever, hold your peace, because two people are talking, they agree, nobody else is saying anything, and you're looking at, as a chair, you're looking at them going, anything, and they're like, okay, if you don't say anything, you're agreeing to this. But generally, hopefully, there's a nice dialogue about each item, but some of them are very, very cut and dry, and you're going, it's an 8-foot fence, check, let's move on.
And I can speak, I'll just get it out on the table now. My view of this is that I would not necessarily do a roll call vote on each one, because I think it takes longer, and for some of them, I think it'd be very straightforward, but I do plan on asking everybody all in favor, any opposed. And if there aren't any opposition, I would assume agreement that way. I would not rely on somebody not saying something just in the general context of discussion, assuming agreement. I was recently burned on an issue with that. And so I learned my lesson once again, that I'm not going to assume that. So I will draw upon, and frankly, please don't take offense if you're quiet and I'm concerned about the look in your eye or whatever, I may call you out and ask you for your opinion, and I want to hear that, because I want to get as much consensus as possible. Recognize we're not always going to agree.
Yeah, and I think that's important, and that's, sometimes when you just don't know what to do. So you've gone through the public hearing, and the planning commission's asked their questions to the applicant, and then everybody kind of looks at each other like, okay, what's next? I think that's a good spot to kind of step into these standards, because then it really helps with the dialogue and trying to get to making a decision. Or if you're just going round and round, go, okay, let's get to these standards, because that helps to direct the conversation and helps us move forward. I'll say that to you if you're, be like, okay, standards, page whatever, please. So, but I think that's important, and really helps. And it does, we need to have these findings, because if somebody appeals it to court, the judges really like to see them, and we've seen really good results from that, at least in favor of the township, because you have your record, you have your reasoning, and the judge isn't there to say yes or no, you made the right decision. They're like an appeals court. They want to make sure you followed the process, that it's a justified answer, that you did everything right. But if the majority decided it was reasonable, he's probably not going to argue over with you if it's reasonable or not. That was a majority decision of the planning commission for whatever reason. They have their answer. It's justified. Move on. But you can get some wild judges too. So I'm not going to say that's always going to happen. But past experience in this district is that if we have some findings to justify our reasoning, the judges typically would side with the township in their decision.
So I have another question. Maybe as a process for kind of discussing these further, do we want to go through each one of them, or just kind of invite input on any particular one? It's kind of grueling to go through each one of them, but like I have a question on number 3, and I think it might apply in some other areas as well. All stormwater shall be managed and disposed of on site and shall not affect neighboring properties. Such stormwater management, blah, 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 in compliance with Antrim County soil erosion sedimentation. So, and controls there. So to me, when I read that, basically it says if it meets Antrim County's requirements, we're good with that. So if you have a large structure or building that goes up, a lot of parking lots, a big roof, whatever it is, if Antrim County says it's okay, are we forced to say it's okay?
You're not forced to. So a couple of things. One is a lot of times we do rely on Antrim County. So you would say, oh, do we have a soil erosion permit? Have they looked at it? But you may have some applications where there's no change at all to the site. You're not going to be adding a building or parking or anything. So you're going to go, there's no change to the site. So we don't even need Antrim County to tell us, because they're not increasing anything. But say I have another township, for example, that they do have a soil erosion permit. They've been through stormwater review, but there's still concerns on the township side about the stormwater. So the township has contracted with an engineer that specializes in it to be able to review the application and provide a report to the township. That would kind of just cover the township to make sure that, yes, everything is right, it does meet everything. So if we get to an application where it's a really sensitive area, it may be something that the township would have to get additional assistance from to do that. Those are typically covered by an escrow account. So an escrow account is something that the developer or applicant pays into to the township, and then the township uses that money to cover the costs that the township incurs for those experts, and then anything that's left over gets returned to the applicant or developer. So we do that so that just the general taxpayers aren't having to pay for somebody's specific application. It's covered all by the applicant or the developer with their fees. So just because it says that, if you have concerns about something or you have additional knowledge or something, soil erosion, the drain commissioner, they're doing the best they can. They have a whole county to deal with though, and we may have some specialized knowledge of a piece of property or some additional concern. So if you do have any of that, feel free to ask, bring it up during a meeting. Hopefully if we're going through the standard, you've already brought it up, because at the standard, you're kind of nearing the end of the process, and that can really upset an applicant at that point when they're thinking they're going to an approval and you go, oh, we need an additional study. If you think about it, bring it up early on if you can. There are things that will come up later. So
Similarly to that, these standards currently don't reference, that I see, like Eagle. Like we had discussions earlier around high water mark and that definition. So we're going to be coming back to that at some point. And I live on lake, and so I'm sensitive to that. But, in this case, kind of Eagle's jurisdiction on the state level, would provide additional requirements, but it seems like we would want to make sure that those requirements are met as well.
right. So I think that item 15, which is on page 1810, near the top, talks about they have to conform to all applicable requirements of the township, county, state, federal, and the approval is conditioned upon them receiving the necessary permits. So I think that to meet that standard, if you say, hey, I really have big concerns about Eagle, I don't think you're going to pass their test. You could say, instead of conditioning that approval, you can say, we'd like to see something in writing from Eagle. The hard thing is that you can't force Eagle to give you that piece of paper. We run in that a lot with different agencies, is that we want to know if they're going to approve it or not. And some agencies say, I'm not going to give you anything in writing until you actually fill out an application and you apply, and we're going to be issuing you a permit. You've paid our fee. So you can get some informal remarks sometimes. I may be able to call and say, what do you think about this? But some agencies will not put it in writing for you. So I'd hate to see something held up if they've tried or we've tried, but we just can't get that kind of final documentation for you. Because ultimately they are going to get caught up in it. They have to get a permit anyways, as a condition before you can do a land use permit. But some of those agencies, I don't know which one is going to be your hang up here for it. But like MDOT will not do things before they get an application. You pay their fee. So they may verbally say, oh, I think I'll be able to approve this once you apply, but there's a big asterisk that says, but until you apply, I'm no guarantee on anything. So, and I guess I should, for the new members at least, kind of explain the process at the meeting and what that kind of looks like. So, you get your packet with all the information. Hopefully you go out to the site and take a look at it. If you're out there, don't interact with anybody. That's part of the ex parte communication. Don't go with another planning commission member. If you do run into somebody out there, just say, hey, I'm here to take a look at the site. Sorry, I can't discuss it with you. do your, do your thing. If a neighbor comes over, I'm sorry, I can't discuss this with you. Please come to the meeting. Please provide public comment. If they have questions about the application, please come into the office. Jackie or I can talk with members of the public, can talk to individuals if they have concerns and questions prior to the meeting. We always have the plans available here for people to come in and look at them, try to get them on the website as well so people can look at them, get familiar with it before the meeting. But I would, you really should go out to the site, take a look at it. If you have any concerns about being out there by yourself, feel free to call us here at the office. Jackie or I can go out with you, or, we can make arrangements to have that done, because the ex parte, we're here to kind of help you, get you the information. So if you need additional information, you can ask us. You can talk to us. We're not going to guide you one way or another. You're just looking for information. So, and that kind of goes, the ex parte goes for any topics. If you're working on a zoning amendment, talk to somebody about it in the grocery store. Don't sit down and have coffee with somebody and talk about it. If you know there's an application in front of you, or you anticipate there's an application is going to be coming in front of you, it's best to just avoid talking about it with anybody. So go out to the site and come prepared for it. At the meeting, if we have a special use application, at the beginning of the meeting, how your agenda is currently set up, we have that public hearing. The applicant will kind of present their case, and then we can open it up for the public to provide comment. At that time, just like regular public comment, the Planning Commission is just here to listen and to take it in. It's not a time to ask questions of the public or engage in any kind of dialogue. And then once that public hearing portion is closed, the Planning Commission then at that time can ask, with permission of the chair, but ask the applicant questions, kind of have that dialogue. So I don't know if Andy, you want to speak to that at all, about the kind of interaction that the Planning Commission could have with the applicant. I think that was one of the questions that I recently just had someone ask, if the Planning Commission has questions, can we answer it? And I said, well, you have to wait till Andy says, yeah, the Planning Commission can ask questions, or that's not something you're going to entertain.
I would entertain that, because I think clarification, but I think that for the commission members, if there are questions, we need to obviously control that. And also, it should be really questions about clarification, not expressing any opinions that we have or anything of that sort. It's, what was meant by this, clarifications on design. I mean, I think there was a different topic altogether, but it was a ZBA meeting fairly recently with an application for a variance to somebody was trying to build a home, and it was going to be close to a road and so on. And there were issues with it because it was kind of fenced in by the lake itself, and the requirements for eco requirements around that. And so bottom line is, there was I was in the audience just observing, and there was a lot of really good interaction, and there was a lot of engagement, but it was a little bit painful to watch, because it was so much detail and so much dialogue going on. But I think it was important for people to understand for the ZBA to understand the full impact of what was going on with it. And I thought the dialogue was good, and they were literally looking at drawings and stuff, and I thought that was helpful. This is a little bit different, obviously, but I think similarly, at the end of the day, if you're up here and you're like, I don't really understand what this person's getting at, and we need to look at a picture, then let's get the picture up. We have to figure out a way to project it, because we're not going to be able to adequately assess something unless we have the information. You can't make reasonable conclusions unless you have the information. So that's what my view of that. But I need guidance from you, obviously, especially since I'm still new at this, to understand that further, to make sure that I don't cross a line that I shouldn't be crossing. But I would highly encourage us on our ability to ask questions if needed for clarification.
Yeah, and so that questioning goes, ask questions, maybe the Planning Commission can answer it, ask questions, maybe the applicant can answer it, ask questions of myself. I'm here to, try to help you. So at any time, during the meeting, before the meeting, after the meeting, reach out, ask questions to help in making your decisions. So then I kind of already touched on this, but after we kind of get through that questioning and everybody's understanding, then we kind of walk through these findings individually, get some consensus on all of them, and then at the end, make a motion. Since we've kind of worked through each of these findings and you have consensus, even if you don't, say you vote and it's 5-2 on one of these findings, but that finding is met because a majority of the planning commission found that that finding is met. At the end, you're going to have a motion that says, I approve, we approve, make a motion to approve the application based on the findings. All the findings are met. Really, every decision should be unanimous because you're voting on what the findings say, not your personal feelings on it. So kind of once you get through that item, once the majority of the planning commission has made a decision on it, you really should say, okay, I disagree, but the findings are all met, therefore it should be approved. I know that doesn't always work out that way. I may bring that up again. I'm not going to die on that sword either. So if you really passionately feel like I can't vote for it because even though all the findings are met, you do you, but that's really what should be done because the motion is based on the findings for that. So I don't know, does anybody have any questions about anything?
And I'd maybe just drill on that a little bit further. I mean, is that clear to everybody? Okay. Just making sure.
I have a couple of questions. Earlier, you talked about special studies and don't ask too late. Is there some guidance on what we can or should ask for that's reasonable as opposed to not unreasonable? A small commercial development, we need an air, noise, traffic, all these studies. And yet sometimes it might be prudent to have a study done. So I understand the timing, but what can you provide in terms of?
Yeah, so I think that there's no clear cut, if you generate this many trips, you need a traffic study in the current ordinance. But I think early on or based on the public comment you receive, you'll kind of get this feeling of something that may be of concern. And you're going to want to tie it back to kind of one of these standards that we have. So the standards cover a lot of things. I mean, I can make a lot of things fit into a standard for why you need a report to be able to justify an answer to that. The concern is we don't ever want to go through and why I say don't wait till the end or kind of look at it all together is you don't want to ask for one study and then have them come back and then be like, oh,
Yeah, that's not fair.
And just kind of delay. And, it is difficult because if you get a very contentious issue and you have members of the public that are really dead set on one item and you're kind of going, well, we can't deal with that. We have dealt with that. You just don't like the answer. No, we're not having additional studies done. That's difficult.
Yep.
But I would just say keep it tied back to the standards. I was going to look in the ordinance. In the special use section. There is, it's in the special use section. It's section 1701, item D. It says at any public meeting, the planning commission shall have the right to require, and it talks about a couple of different things in there. So I think some of these, you could kind of get some of those studies wrapped up into too. So these are not something everybody has to do, but the planning commission could require above and beyond for certain special uses. So most things you can ask for more information, get more studies on. Definitely if you're thinking, hey, I want to know more about this, let me know. I'll tell you if you're way off base. Usually it's around something that a different agency kind of controls, like so stormwater. Usually townships get a little bit more involved in that. at certain times, depending on the site. Sometimes you'll run into it with like a well or a septic system, but a lot of times we really rely on the health department. They have a pretty robust, state law and health code they have to follow. And, unless it's some sort of an engineered design, engineered field or something like that, where we could have an engineer on our side come and say, no, your engineer miscalculated that. Typically those we kind of leave to the health department, but I'm not going to say always.
Okay. I've got a similar question about the site plan itself. For some of the items, like number 4, site plan shall provide reasonable visual and sound privacy. If there's a site plan and we say, we can't really tell exactly whether or not it's reasonable or not, we say we need some more detailed, another version of the site plan, a rendering, something like that.
Yeah.
Is
absolutely.
that common?
Yeah, I think that
Okay.
we don't have any easy applications anymore. I mean, that time is gone. So you may need additional information, and that's completely reasonable to ask that. Again, I would prefer near the beginning instead of the end if possible.
Yep.
But yeah, you can ask for more.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Are there any other thoughts or comments on these standards? If you're not familiar with them now, we all will be in a few more
Next
days.
week. You're gonna get sick of listening to me talk next week, probably. But
So, and maybe one more question for the group. Obviously, it's going to be important for each of you to participate in the sense of going on the site plan and visiting on your own, or with somebody from the township like Sarah. Are there, I guess, any broader questions, not specific to the standards, around the process or about what we're going into with this?
And also, there will likely be in the near future some additional training that's put on by different organizations. It can go to very broad planning topics. They do have like a site plan review course that teaches you how to read site plans and has a scale and items like that. So if you have any interest in that, feel free to reach out. I sit on a planning commission too, and I just relied on staff to tell me if the site plan was complete or not. I might look through the ordinance or just out of curiosity ask, but if you really get into it and you really like it or want to know more, and you want to review them for me, then, we can get you as much information and training as you'd like to get up to speed on that. And if, we'd really like to have you comfortable at least looking at a site plan and dealing with it and knowing what it is, to familiarize yourself with it. So even if it's something like now, if you wanted just more, we can pull some out in the office too, walk through them and look at them. So.
Good. So I think with that, we've completed the, all 3 portions of our agenda for tonight. Yes,
I apologize.
there's one other item.
At the last meeting, there was a question about the M88 site plan and special use application. And I did get some correspondence that I wanted to hand out to the planning commission. One of the letters is a privilege document from our attorney. And so I think we're going to hand them out, maybe give you a couple minutes to read through it and then ask for the letters back, so that they, I trust you, but at the same time, it's a privileged document, so. So that email, the first front page email is from MTA. And then the second page is from the attorney.
Sarah, thank you for reminding me of that.
I don't know if anybody has any questions. Some of them we can't talk about because they're in the confidential letter, but if there's anything else you can think of, or you can always give me a call and we can chat about it too.
Okay.
I think it should be pretty clear.
So with that, I think we can move off of the main agenda and move back into public commentary. So at this point, if there's anybody that'd like to make some public comments, please step forward. Please try to keep them to about 3 minutes. Thank you.
Andy, when you said about the, you have to go through the motion, second, discussion, and then voting, that's been helpful to me a lot of times to remind me to do it, right? And it's very, very important to go back, because the minutes have to be reflected. If it isn't, that motion wasn't made. It's really, go ahead, or something test it. So it's very critical, and I like, back to getting to pick up on it, through the process. But 6 months you didn't get, or you did, and I can take care of it. And you went.
I somehow doubt that.
No problem.
Thank you.
So that's real good. I also want to talk a little bit about the master plan. I like what you're doing, having the internal discussion here or training. That's very critical. When I joined the planning commission, somebody told me about the management plan. It took me a while to find out what it was. We weren't given a copy right away. And unfortunately, when I became chair of the planning commission, all of a sudden, that's the responsibility of the planning commission is the master plan. And so I was heavily involved with it. I thank Ellen Martell for the help and also the rest of the people. The master plan, one of the key things is public input involvement. We are consultant at that time. We had 3 major input from the public. A weekend activity, because a lot of people were only weekenders. We wanted to get them up here, not only the electors, but also the people around. The second thing we did is evening, and then we have third session. I think there was a survey too. So if you're going to get into it, really get into it. But before you get into it, do what you're doing. Study it, get it home, have a discussion. It's very, very important. It's your master plan. I mean, the consultant helps get it together, organize, and does it, but it's yours to review. I remember going back to our consultant and say, hey, where's this part? He says, oh, you want it in? Okay, we did it. The other thing is master plan training. There's a real good professional master planner course. I don't know if it's online now, but I took it at a facility. It was excellent with all the people from the communities around you. As Laura knows, I'm an advocate of training, and it's in our bylaws and everything else. So very, very important. You're there representing what it is, and those training courses are good. And I will look on MTA and Michigan Planners Associates. Last but not least, I love the discussion at the end and going on. So that's very important to bring out the people as much as you could, because it's a group activity, the voting. So just want to give you a little feedback. Good.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comments this evening? So with that, any reflections, final reflections from commission members this evening? I'm disappointed. No, actually, I'm not. I'm happy we're done.
Must be
So-
9 o'clock.
Yes, it's getting about that time. No, we've got 32 minutes. No, I think at this point, I think we're through the main part. Sarah, anything else? I'd like to, someone make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I will second that.
Discussion? No discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you. The meeting is adjourned.